Hi guys, welcome back. It's Danielle, and today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up and maybe for the heck of it, a February TBR. I am sorry if this angle is weird. Hopefully it turns out okay. I tried to test it out before I actually started filming, but I moved my chair into another room. We're reorganizing our living room, and I'm not quite sure what my filming setup needs to be, so I'm just standing in front of my bookcase today instead of sitting, and it's really thrown me off. So I am just going to quickly go over what I read in January, what I'm maybe hoping to read in February. I really have no reading plans for February just because I am 39 weeks today, so baby could come at any time. So who knows what my reading is going to be like in the next few weeks. But what I did read in January was 3 books. I read 1 nonfiction, 1 adult fantasy, and 1 YA fantasy. And so the first book that I read in January was Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is a nonfiction self-improvement book that's kind of about creating habits and how tiny habits can sustain long-term goals. And it's just about making really small changes in your life that add up to one big change. I listened to this on audiobook. It is narrated by the author, and I thought there were some really good nuggets in this book. I wish I would have had it in physical form as well as audio because I felt like I was distracted while listening to it. I listen to audiobooks while I clean my house and when I'm driving and on the bus and everything, so I usually can focus pretty well, but when it is a book that I maybe want to take notes on or highlight or just kind of remember specific things from, I feel like I can't focus as well, which I didn't know until I read this book. So I didn't rate this book because I didn't feel like I fully got everything I could have gotten out of it. And so I put it on hold at the library, but clearly it's a very popular time to read this book, being January, the beginning of January. And so a lot of people want to read this book right now. So I thought maybe it would come in and I could just reread it or reskim it this month, but it still hasn't come in from the library. I'm still weighed down on the hold list. So eventually I'll hopefully reread it or reskim it and be able to have some better takeaways. But overall, I thought the book was very good. I thought it really hit home some really interesting points and facts about making habits and not just goals, and how habits can kind of help you create a lifestyle that makes your goals attainable. So kind of starting at the smallest point and building up to bigger goals. And I also felt like he had some really interesting stories about athletes and comedians and professionals and just all these different people and how they have kind of used this. He studied how they were successful and how what techniques they use, and he kind of accumulated that all together. So if you're looking for a book about kind of habit and routine and goal setting, I definitely recommend it. I think he has some really good nuggets of wisdom in there, and it's probably my favorite read of the month. Probably. I still don't quite know where I sit on that. I didn't have the best reading month this month. Next up, I read Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is an adult fantasy novel that follows a girl named Sanshia, and she has these abilities that no one else in her world has, and they make her a great thief. She is able to kind of touch items and sense everything about that item, and she can kind of listen into items. She can touch a wall and see the whole layout of a building type thing, but it also makes it very hard for her to interact with other people, and even clothing. She wears the same clothing and gloves and things so she doesn't accidentally touch things because it can be very overwhelming to her. And she lives in this world that is, I believe it's kind of Venetian inspired. There's merchant houses in this world that kind of run this city, and then there's the people who live in the cracks between the merchant houses. They live in the commons, and they're the poor people who have to really struggle to survive. And so Sanshia is one of those people. In this world, there is this magic system called scribing, and scribing is when you can write a command in this mysterious language on an item, and that item will believe a different reality. So you can write on wood and make it believe that it is stone, so it'll be stronger. You can write on something that it is falling from a certain height, and so then if you would to throw it, it will go way faster than you could just throw it because it thinks it's going that fast. And so it's a really interesting and intricate magic system. I will say the author, I think he did a great job of creating this magic system, but we get told over and over and over again kind of the same things of how it works, and he likes to be really repetitive with how this magic system works and what it is and what it does, and I kind of felt like we get it. Like, I understood it the first few times. I don't need you to keep telling me again and again and again how great your magic system is and how smart it is, because I do get it. In general, his writing is a little bit repetitive. This is a very long book. I didn't think that it necessarily needed to be. We kind of experience things with one character, and then we'll head hop to another character, and then another character, and another character, and then 5 character jumps later, we learn about and discuss the thing that we already experienced with a character several pages ago. So I felt like we were kind of rehashing events that had already happened, that we had seen firsthand, and then we had to talk about them again later. So that's kind of my main critique of the book, would be that just the repetitiveness and the writing style kind of dragged down the reading experience for me. I was listening to this one on audio as well, and I just felt like I would listen and listen and listen and be listening for a long time, and then I would look in my physical book and I'd read 12 pages. So it just kind of felt a little bit like a slog. But I did really, really like the characters in this one, and I really want to know what's going to happen next in the storyline. So I am interested in that part of it. So I will continue on with this series. Hopefully the next one I think is just releasing or will be releasing soon. So I am interested in continuing with this. I gave this a 3.5 star, rounded it up to a 4 on Goodreads. I enjoyed it. There were some parts of it that I didn't love quite as much, but overall I think it's a good read. It's an interesting read, and it has a really cool magic system in it for sure. If it sounds like I'm out of breath, it's probably because I am. And so then the last book I read this month that I just finished yesterday was Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I read this as a buddy read over on Instagram. I actually read the last one as a buddy read as well, with Murphy's Patreon group. This one I read as a buddy read over on Instagram with the Read Gush Book Club group. And they are still reading it. The read-along doesn't end until February 8th, I believe. So if you wanted to join in, if I get this up in a timely manner, you still have time. And this is a retelling of the Queen of Hearts, or an origin story for the Queen of Hearts and how she became the Queen of Hearts. So this follows Kath, our main character, and she is the daughter of the Martian and the Marchioness, and she is kind of slated to marry the King of Hearts, and she does not want to. And so she wants to just open a bakery and live kind of a simple life and not have anything to do with the king, with being royal, with being part of the gentry. She just wants to live her life, and there is a new court joker that she has taken some interest in, and she really likes him, and so she just kind of does not want to be queen, and this is the story of how she becomes the Queen of Hearts. I was really liking this book. I really connected with it. I loved the whimsy. I loved the world and the characters. I felt like I've never read Alice in Wonderland. I've seen the movie, the animated movie. I haven't seen the Tim Burton movie, so really that's my only context I have for Alice is the animated Disney movie. But I really want to read Alice now after reading Heartless. So that is one super positive thing that came out of this read. But I felt like we were kind of just thrown into the world with very little explanation. So if you're not super familiar with Alice, the beginning might be a little confusing, but I was able to kind of grasp everything pretty quickly and figure out what was going on. The rules of the world, there's not really any rules to the world in Alice in Wonderland, really. It's a magic system, if you can call it that, that has no explanation and plot holes and loopholes and all kinds of things. But that kind of adds to the charm, I think. So I really liked the world. I was really loving the characters. I was falling head over heels for the romance. And then the ending wasn't quite what I was expecting. It was what I was expecting because I knew I knew how this book was going to end. I knew what was coming. Just the way we got there wasn't what I was expecting or envisioning. I felt like we were given some threads of different directions in which we could have gotten to our ending, and I felt like those would have been more interesting than the actual direction the ending took, which maybe doesn't make sense. I have a full spoiler-filled Goodreads review, so if you want to check it out, the link to my Goodreads will be in the description below. But I was just kind of hoping for something almost more tragic, and the ending just didn't hit it home for me. What the ending was very creepy, and I loved the creepy vibe at the ending, and like the three sisters, I loved them. But I don't know, just something about the ending and how it went, I didn't love it. And I ended up giving it only 3 stars because of the ending. And not that it was like, I was mad that it ended in the way, like I wasn't mad that she turned into the Queen of Hearts and like that's how it ended. I just didn't love how we got there, if that makes sense. If you want to talk more about it, DM me on Instagram. I did really, really, really love this audiobook. Rebecca Soler does the audiobook, and she does a fantastic job with character voices and just her portrayal of all these characters. So honestly, even though I liked this book, like, don't get me wrong, it's not a book that I disliked. I gave it a 3 star. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. I probably won't reread it. That's kind of how it falls for me. But I do think the audiobook is worth the listen. That being said, there's a lot of people out there who love this book. There's kind of a lot of people who don't like this book, so there's kind of a lot of mixed feelings about this book. There's some people who don't like the majority of the book and just love the ending. And then there's me who loved the majority of the book and didn't like the ending. So don't let me not loving it stop you from reading it. And if you can find the audiobook, I highly recommend. So those are the books that I read in January. And now to my tentative February TBR, aka the books that I put on a list. That really means nothing. The first one is Tell Us by Tiffany Hackett. This is a self-published book. It is the sequel to Ember. It is a YA fantasy trilogy that is currently in the works. Tiffany's working on the 3rd book right now. And this follows Nat, or I say Natalia, but I think it's Natalia. I mean, there's a pronunciation guide in the beginning. I should be able to figure it out. But anyway, Nat, who is a princess who is queened before her time, and there is this threat to her kingdom. There's these ancient titans who have been kind of long thought to be dead, or they're banished, they're dealt with, they're gone. But we find out in the first book that might not be the case, and her kingdom might be in more danger than she thinks. And so her, along with her snarky bodyguard, Jin, who is an elf, and her friends Cam and Marin. Cam is a blacksmith and Marin is a fire witch. Kind of go on an adventure trying to prevent the keys from falling into the wrong hands and the Titans from reawakening, is the basic premise of the first book. And so this book is kind of following up the events that happened in the first book. I really loved the first book. I love Nat and I honestly, I love all the characters, and I have had this book for a while and I've been needing to read it. This is one of the books that I have already started reading, but I'm only like a chapter in. But I really want to annotate this one and like take my time with it. So that's kind of why it's been taking me a little bit to get through it when I started it this month. But that is my next read and kind of my top priority for this month. If I'm going to get anything read, I would really like it to be this. However, I only have a physical copy, and so that might be a little challenging, but that's my goal. Next up, I'm going to talk about Little Women. I had Little Women on my TBR this last month. I don't think I actually did a TBR video. No, I didn't. But I had it on my TBR this last month. I really want to see the new movie. And so I was like, oh, I should read the book because I haven't read it yet. I actually haven't seen the old movie. I've only ever seen the play. So I kind of know the story, but I really don't remember it all that well. And so I really wanted to read Little Women. I have it on my Kindle and I have it on audiobook. And so I have started that one as well. I started listening to it because, as you can tell from all the books I read last month, or this month, whatever, January, I listened to all 3 on audiobook. And so I'm really into audiobooks right now. And so I made that my next audiobook to listen to. And I'm really liking it so far. I love the characters. They're all just so sweet. That's why I love classic literature. Not that everyone is sweet in classic literature, but there are some books where everyone is just so sweet, even though there's kind of like terrible things happening. It's during the Civil War and these girls are poor. Like they're sweet, lovely characters. I'm really liking that one so far, but that is kind of my other book. Those are my top 2 priority books to read this month. I also have The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I don't know how to say his name. On my Kindle as well. That is the first Witcher book. The collection of short stories. My husband and I watched The Witcher recently and I loved it, but I want more content. I have the game as well and I've played parts of the game. So we'll see if I get any more gaming done this month, but I kind of highly doubt it. So I would like to kind of experience more of the story and the world by reading that one. So I have that on my list and on my Kindle. And then finally, I have The Fellowship of the Ring, which I have also technically started. But this one as well, I want to annotate it as I read it. I have it in this massive 50th anniversary single bound copy, which is really exhausting to read from and hold up because it's heavy. It's really big. It's got Bible paper pages and it's thick, but it's so floppy. But yeah, so that's why this one is taking me a while. I do have it on audiobook and I could listen to it. I listened to The Hobbit and I really loved it. So I have the audiobook, which is the same narrator for this. So I could listen to it and follow along, but I just really want to annotate it. And I feel like I'm not as good about annotating books when I listen to them because I get kind of sucked into the story and I don't pause it to be like, oh, that was a good line, I should highlight that, things like that. So I am kind of working on annotating this copy and listening to it, but again, not listening to it and reading it, it's slow going, but I'm going to work my way through this whole book eventually this year. It's one of my goals. So it might be just a little bit of a slow progress. So those are all the books that I read in January, all the books that maybe I'll read in February, and a little bit of updates on, no, I still haven't had my baby yet, but it could be any day now. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys are reading in the comments down below and what your favorite book you read in January was. And maybe I will be seeing you guys again soon. But thanks for watching and happy reading.